Hi guys, my name is Ryan, the Frugal Analyst, and recently I just bought more I bonds that's earning 2.2% interest rate annually without any state income tax and is fully guaranteed by the US government. I think I bonds gives a better rate than a 1-year CD or a high yield savings account, especially because I live in California and I usually pay an additional 5 to 10% in state income tax on a typical interest bearing account. So in this video, I'll go over three things. The first one is what is an I bond and why is it better than CDs or a high yield savings account? Two, I'll go over the interest rate calculation of an I bond, so going over the fixed rate and the semi-annual interest rate and how they're calculated in great detail. Three, I'll go over how to buy I bonds through Treasury Direct with screenshots along the way. And also, I'll have a table of contents at the bottom of this video so you can skip around if you want to. So section number one, what is an I bond and why is it better than a high yield savings account or a 1-year CD? So I bonds are a special type of bonds issued by the US government specifically for savers. And similar to treasuries, there's no state income tax. You can only buy it from the government website Treasurydirect.gov and only up to $10,000 per year. So it is limited. The mechanics is similar to a 1-year CD but have special rules and restrictions. So let's go over them right now. So the first rule is redemptions. After you buy an I bond, you can't redeem it in the first year. And if you redeem it within year 1 to year 5, you will get hit by a 3-month interest penalty. But if you redeem it after year 5 and longer, there is no penalty and you can keep accruing interest up to 30 years. The next rule is around taxes. There's no state income tax for I bonds, and this is my favorite part because in California I have to pay an additional 5 to 10% for state income tax. So if I'm comparing it to a typical high yield savings account, my 2.2% I bonds interest rate is more like 2.4%. So that gives me an additional boost in return. In addition to that, you only pay federal taxes when you redeem your I bond. So your interest can keep accruing year over year. So think of it like an IRA where you basically can accrue interest over 30 years and you only get taxed at the end. So what that means is in between years, usually a typical account would get taxed year over year. At the end of the year, they give you 1099. Well, for I bonds, you don't get taxed on that interest. You basically keep accruing interest until you redeem the bond. So there is a slight benefit in return because your untaxed return is making more interest for your account. The next rule is the interest rate, and this is by far the most complicated part about I bonds is how do you calculate the interest rate for an I bond. Right now, as of this video, the first 6-month annualized interest rate is 2.2%. And with my state tax, it's like getting a 2.4% return in comparison to a typical savings account. So this is why I'm putting money into I bonds because I'll get more than my Wealthfront account that's giving me around 1.8% APY right now. Now the interest calculation for I bonds is super unique. They have two components. The first component is the fixed rate. That fixed rate stays the same depending on when you buy your bond, and it is valid throughout the life of the bond. The other component is the inflation rate. The inflation rate is adjusted every 6 months and it's dependent on the consumer price index. If there is deflation, the worst thing that can happen is that the interest rate is zero, but it will never be negative. Now, the actual complicated formula to calculate interest for I bonds is the fixed rate plus the semi-annual inflation rate times 2 plus the fixed rate times the semi-annual interest rate. And to get the 2.2% interest rate, it is basically taking the fixed rate, which is 0.2% at the moment, and the semi-annual inflation rate at 1.01%. Here's a screenshot of the math if you're curious, but the most important thing is to understand the two variables of input. The first one is the fixed rate, the second one is the semi-annual interest rate. Now let's talk about how the fixed rate is set. So the fixed rate can change every May and November of each year, but there's no official document on how the fixed rate is actually set, and we want that rate to be as high as possible. So looking at the historical data, where I chart out the effective Fed funds rate, the semi-annual inflation rate, and the one-year Treasury yield, it seemed like the fixed rate is correlated to the Fed funds rate and inflation. Last November, the fixed rate dropped from 0.5% to 0.2%. We also see that the Fed's fund rate dropped from 2.2% as calculated on November 2018 to 1.55% on November 2019. So going back to historical, when the fixed rate was at 0.3%, the Fed funds rate is at 1.7%. And we are currently at 0.2% right now with the Fed fund rate at 1.55. So it seems to make sense that when the Fed funds is lower at 1.16, the fixed rate is at 0.1%. So it seems to make sense that currently we are at 0.2% fixed rate, and that's not a bad rate at all. It is low, and the rate used to be higher decades ago, but 0.2% seems to make sense at this current moment. So I'm guessing that if there is a recession and the Fed funds rate drop again, the fixed rate might actually go back to zero. So 0.2% is greater than zero, so it's not bad. So next is how to calculate the semi-annual inflation rate. And Treasury Direct set this rate in conjunction with the fixed rate changes in May and November, but you can actually calculate it yourself if you want to geek out on this. The index is coming from the Consumer Price Index, and more specifically, the Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers, or CPI-U. So let me show you the calculation. I'll put the website links at the bottom of this video for the BLS website. So this is the BLS website where the CPI data is published. Let's put this data into Excel and calculate the semi-annual inflation rate. So as of this video, the semi-annual inflation rate is 1.01%, and that rate was calculated last November 2019. So let's do the math. For the November rate change, the people working inside the government is probably doing this calculation in October to release the new effective rate on November 1st. So in October, they probably have the September month end. So in September 2019, the index is at 256 and change. Going back 6 months ago from September 2019, if you divide September index by March index, you get exactly 1.01%. And that is the semi-annual rate that is active from November 2019 to April 2020. So let's go back and check this for May 2019. The semi-annual inflation rate was 0.7%. So taking 2 months before May, its March index is 254.2. And the index 6 months prior is 252.4 on September 2018. Dividing them and getting the difference, you get the 0.7%, and that's the semi-annual interest rate that you see in the Treasury Direct website. Overall, the interest calculation is interesting, but the most important thing to me is that it's currently giving me 2.2% interest rate right now for the first 6 months of my bond purchase, and there's no state income tax, and my saving account is only giving me 1.8%. And for that reason, that's why I'm putting more money into I-bonds right now. So how do you invest in I-bonds? So right now, the only way to buy I-bonds is through the government website Treasurydirect.gov. Create an account there, and it's a government website, so expect some of the functionality to be a little bit clunky, and you have this old school login page, but it's a legitimate website that's maintained by the government. Connect a bank account to your account and you're ready to invest. The first step is to click Buy Direct. Then buy the Series I and click Submit. Put in how much money you want to put in, and the minimum is $25. And you can even go $25 and a penny if you really want to. I just schedule it for a single purchase, and then you just click Submit, and a second confirmation page comes up. click submit again, and we're done. I decided to invest $5,000, and on the purchase date, my account got pulled $5,000. So it's really easy to invest in I-bonds once you have a Treasurydirect.gov account. So video summary. I-bonds are a great alternative to a one-year CD or a high-yield savings account. It pays based on a fixed rate plus the semi-annual inflation rate. There's no state income tax, only federal, and it is guaranteed by the US government. Currently, I-bonds are paying 2.2% annually. So that's it for I-bonds. I hope you can take advantage of this government bond program. Let me know if you find this information helpful and ask any questions in the comments. Please smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm and subscribe for more frugal videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.